Good evening. Today we bring you the scene from Riyadh, where Syrian interim President Ahmad al-Sharaa stood as guest of honour at the 9th edition of the Future Investment Initiative conference in the Saudi capital. As he took the stage among global dignitaries and investors, this moment marked more than a photo op. It signalled a turning point in Syria's relations with the region and the world. Moments earlier, al-Sharaa greeted Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in a handshake that underscored the significance of his visit. The gesture was not simply ceremonial. It conveyed Riyadh's willingness to engage with Syria's new leadership under al-Sharaa's stewardship, following the overthrow of the previous regime. The Crown Prince then engaged with US guest Donald Trump Jr., reminding spectators of the broader geopolitical convergences at play. On stage, al-Sharaa walked with purpose, greeted by applause and expectation, then took his seat at a round table during the forum. Among the audience were Saudi leaders, international investors and ambassadors, all watching closely as Syria sought to reposition itself. His wife, Latifa Drubi, sat among the audience, her presence a testament to Syria's attempt to project a normalizing image after years of war and isolation. Al-Sharaa opened by emphasizing that in the past 10 months, his country had attracted $28 billion in investments. In addressing the global audience, he said that Syria was ready to be part of the economic transformation sweeping the Middle East and beyond the Middle East. He framed this achievement not simply as a number, but as a signal. Glass front offices rising from the rubble, factories beginning to hum again, and Syrian entrepreneurs finding partners in the Gulf and elsewhere. He reminded investors that the fall of the Assad regime was more than the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of rebuilding. He said, "We stand today ready to integrate, ready to transform, and ready to invest in our future." The applause that followed was a clear sign of the audience's recognition of the seismic shift taking place in Damascus and its reconstruction agenda. But this is more than economics. The presence of al-Sharaa in Riyadh signals a major diplomatic recalibration. Just months ago, he was a rebel commander. Now he commands the international stage. His presence among Saudi, American, Gulf and global investment leaders represents Syria's bid for legitimacy, reconnection and reconstruction. Al-Sharaa outlined the major tasks ahead: rebuilding infrastructure devastated by years of conflict, restoring governance, attracting foreign direct investment, restarting oil and gas fields, repairing relationships with regional neighbours and with global powers. He went further. Syria would open to trade, to partnerships and to modernization, provided that security and rule of law were guaranteed. He addressed skeptics directly. Yes, the war wounds remain. Yes, Syria is fragile. But he declared that the transition was underway and that his government is committed to transparency, accountability and stability. He cited the new cabinet announced earlier this year, emphasizing inclusivity with ministers from minorities and technocrats as evidence of the change in direction. As noted in March, al-Sharaa announced a transitional government including Alawite, Druze, Christian and Kurdish figures. He underscored that the days of isolation are over. Syria must be part of the global economy, part of Middle East infrastructure networks, part of investment flows. He welcomed Saudi Arabia's role, along with other Gulf states, as strategic partners in the reconstruction of Syria. He invited investors to look at landmark projects, free zones, new ports, power plants, revival of agriculture, and the revival of tourism in Syria's ancient monuments and UNESCO sites. In another segment, he responded to questions about security. He admitted the challenges remain immense: insurgency remnants, regional dynamics, border issues with Israel, and the risk of renewed violence in vulnerable regions. He said his government is working to unify the military, integrate forces, restore the monopoly of the state on arms, and ensure that Syria does not become a fragmented zone of failed governance. He had warned earlier that the new Syria would not tolerate unregulated weapons or factional power. He also addressed the minority communities, explicitly mentioning the Druze and Alawite groups, saying, "Our unity is our strength. Diversity is not our weakness. We must protect every citizen, every creed, every region." This message came as analysts note fresh clashes in Saudia and warnings of renewed violence in the southwestern governorates. Turning back to the investment narrative, al-Sharaa referenced the $28 billion figure as just the beginning. He said these initial funds came from Saudi and Gulf partners, diaspora Syrians, and early-stage Western investors who saw the opportunity in the phoenix rising from the ashes. He noted that Syria's comparative advantages, low labour cost, strategic location, untapped natural resources make it attractive for the right partner willing to engage in risk mitigation and long-term vision. In the roundtable discussion that followed, Prince Mohammed bin Salman listened intently, as did other Gulf dignitaries. The Crown Prince's media presence underlined that Saudi Arabia is positioning itself as the region's investment hub, not just for its own economy, but as the gateway for reconstruction across the Levant. Outside the forum, the symbolism was unmistakable. Syria shaking hands with the Gulf, Syria sitting on the same stage as regional heavyweights, Syria no longer a pariah, but an emerging frontier for capital, for infrastructure, and for regional connectivity. Yet the road ahead remains steep. Syria faces a devastated economy, massive refugee returns pending, reconstruction costs in the hundreds of billions, war-damaged infrastructure, and a security environment still fragile. The international sanctions regime remains partly in place. Questions linger over accountability for wartime atrocities. The integration of autonomous Kurdish areas remains unresolved. Al-Sharaa's task is to convert rhetoric into reality, to make the $28 billion pledge the tip of a much larger wave, to create institutions that can administer projects professionally, to build transparent frameworks, competitive courts, procurements that foreign investors can trust, and to navigate the deep geopolitical fault lines between Iran, Turkey, Russia, the US, Gulf states, and Israel. In his closing remarks at the forum, he said, "We invite the world to bet on Syria, not on the war-torn Syria of yesterday, but the Syria of tomorrow, a country rebuilding, investing, reconnecting. We have the land, we have the people, we have the courage." He offered his hand to investors. This is our moment. Join us. As he left the stage, the applause echoed, but the real test begins now. The forum may have ended, the cameras may have turned away, but the rebuilding of Syria's economy, the reintegration of Syria's statecraft, and the reconnection of Syria to the global marketplace have only just begun. The journey will be long, the risks high, but the opportunity is vast. What we witnessed in Riyadh today is not simply a photo op. It's the opening move in a high-stakes game of reconstruction, diplomacy, investment, and statecraft. For Syria, for Saudi Arabia, and for the region, the next months and years will determine whether this moment becomes a milestone or merely a milestone speech.